0, kekekeka. Like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves, this gust of cold wind seemed to have pierced through the illusory spirit space and ripped everything apart. It came roaring towards them, and at the center of the cold wind, the space seemed to be torn apart. A terrifying pressure that caused one's heart to tremble spread across the entire world, and instantly devoured the powerful qi that was emitted from the fight between these two men. Mr. Xiaoyan, let's go. Xuan hastily spoke. The two of them had stayed in the yin wind vein for a long time. They were familiar with the power of the yin wind. Although the yin wind that the two girls usually saw was shockingly evil, the yin wind that suddenly appeared in front of them was like a tornado and storm. This was the first time they had seen it, but their hair stood on end. A strong sense of shock surged in their hearts. The instant the Xiaoao's voice resounded in their minds, Xiaoyan's expression changed. Immediately, his body trembled, and he took the initiative to disperse the overbearing and fierce attack. After which, his body flashed wildly, and he was just about to dodge Zhou Bai's attack. Zhou Bai's expression changed slightly. Obviously, he didn't expect that Xiaoyan would be the first to withdraw his attack. Immediately, he looked at the wild and violent yin wind that was sweeping towards him. He clenched his teeth tightly, and let out a series of furious roars. Even though he was injured, his 10 fingers were still moving, and they were barely able to disperse the attack that was like a blazing sun. Looking at Zhou Bai's slightly pale face, Xiaoyan let out a soft sigh. Fortunately, Zhou Buyi dispersed his attack at the last moment. Otherwise, no matter how fast he would still be affected by the attack. At that time, he would more or less suffer some injuries. Quickly leave this place. Xiaoyan's voice was low and deep. His body moved and appeared beside Xuan and Kai Lin in the blink of an eye. He lifted the two ladies by the waist and rushed out of the canyon. Wind erosion whizzed over. He could already feel traces of chilliness permeating his entire body. His blood seemed to have solidified. Zhou Bai's expression was gloomy. His toes lightly stepped on the ground and arrived beside Zhou Xingyue. He grabbed the latter's hand and followed closely behind Xiaoyan. Although he did not know the power of the wind erosion, he could still feel the terrifying qi contained within it. It was likely that even a peak emperor cultivation expert would be torn into pieces if he was sucked into it. Swoosh! The 5 of them quickly fled out of the canyon. The wind erosion behind them was getting closer and closer. The coldness was like countless thin needles stabbing into their bodies, causing their skin to hurt. Faster! If you really can't do it, then use the dragon soul bone to get out of here. For the first time, the Xiaoao's voice trembled slightly. Clearly, it was extremely afraid of the wind erosion. All right. Xiaoyan made a prompt decision. A light flashed across his right hand, which was hugging Xuan. The dragon soul bone appeared in his hand. He was about to pour the origin qi into it when he seemed to have thought of something. He clenched his teeth and suddenly slowed his footsteps. He turned his head and furiously cried out, "Zhou Buyi, pull me. I will take you away." What? Zhou Buyi, who was following Xiaoyan to escape, was slightly stunned, and then he responded. He held Zhou Xingyu's little hand tightly, and was about to rush over in large strides. Ah! Suddenly, the speed of the wind erosion increased once again. In an instant, it arrived behind Zhou Buyi. A terrifying suction force surged out. Zhou Bai's face turned pale all of a sudden. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his body trembled. Both of his arms lost their strength in an instant. Zhou Xingyue cried out in shock as she was swept into the violent cold wind. Star Moon! Zhou Bai's eyes were about to split open. He ignored his injuries and was about to charge into the chilly wind. Just as his body moved, he was thrown out by the cold wind and violently landed on a huge rock in the distance, smashing the rock into pieces. Zhou Buyi even spat out another mouthful of fresh blood and his qi became sluggish. Xiaoao, take them and leave first. Seeing this sudden scene, Xiaoyan's heart skipped a beat. Without any time to think, he threw the dragon's soul bone into the air. A purple figure flashed past, and the Xiaoao tightly gripped the dragon's soul bone in his hand. What are you doing? Kai Lin's phoenix eyes widened as she lightly shouted. I will go and save her. The Xiaoao will bring you guys away first. Xiaoyan put the 2 girls down and gave the 2 of them a deep look. After which, he leapt and rushed in the direction of the wind erosion. After the latter swallowed Zhou Xingyue, her speed was unexpectedly reduced. It was extremely strange. Mr. Xiao Yan, be careful. Xu did not have the time to dissuade him. She could only speak in a loud voice. Her eyes were filled with worry. Damn fellow. Kai Lin gritted her teeth and her cold pretty face also had a touch of worry. Take him and leave. He lifted Zhou Buyi and threw him towards the Xiao Ao. Xiao Yan's body flashed, and a golden light emerged from his body. The monarch flame wrapped around his body, and he suddenly entered into the cold wind erosion. This guy is really crazy. The Xiao Ao patted its head and sighed. It caught the unconscious Zhou Buyi, and in the instant the wind erosion swept over, it brought the three of them and disappeared into the wind-yin meridians. Boom! The wind erosion flowed unscrupulously in the yin wind vein. Numerous mountain peaks were swept into it and turned into powder. It was as if the end of the world had begun to play out in the yin wind vein. Crack! Xiao Yan endured the frightening pressure and entered the corrosion of the wind. In an instant, his sternum was shattered. His chest was deep and his breathing became hurried. A suffocating feeling surged over like floodwater. The origin chi protecting his body was instantly torn apart. If it was not for the monarch flame, even Xiao Yan's current body would have been torn apart in an instant. My God, who can survive in there? Xiao Yan was frightened. He struggled to move forward in the erosion. A chill covered his entire body. Xiao Yan strengthened his mind and soul energy surged out from between his brows, searching for traces of Zhou Xingyue everywhere. It's over. If Zhou Xingyue dies, Zhou Buyi will probably go crazy. Xiao Yan's breathing was rapid. He only took a few steps before his body went soft. The golden blood and qi in his body were no longer surging. He was in the wind erosion. Every moment, he was under an endless pressure. All the bones in his body seemed to be cracking, making it hard for people to breathe. What is in front? Xiao Yan's face turned purple. Waves of pain stimulated his nerves. Just as he was about to escape from the wind erosion, a bright light in front of him was suddenly found by the majestic soul force. Is it the feeling of the arts of synchronization? He struggled to get in front of the light. Flames were burning in his eyes. He could feel a familiar feeling from this light. It was the same feeling as his star execution. Zhou Xingyue. Seeing the unconscious person in the light, Xiao Yan was delighted. He did not have time to think about why the latter was still alive. He hurriedly picked her up. Zhou Xingyu's light body was now as heavy as thousands of kilograms of stones. Xiao Yan's tired body was even more exhausted. He gritted his teeth and walked step by step towards the exit of the wind erosion. Puchi! A mouthful of golden blood was spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth. His hair was in a mess. The cold wind was like a blade that cut through his body through the monarch flame. His clean body was covered in blood, but Zhou Xingyue was wrapped by a mysterious light. The endless cold wind could not hit her in the slightest. Grandaunt, when we get out of here, we must kill Zhou Buyi. The price we have to pay is too great. Xiao Yan felt dizzy and forced a smile in his heart. An endless amount of pressure fell down from the sky. His bones were broken one after another. Golden light surged within his body, repairing his broken bones. Every time he repaired his broken bones, it would consume a huge amount of origin chi. In just a short period of time, all the origin chis that were originally full had been used up. Golden blood was spurting out from his mouth one after another. Xiao Yan's chi was weak. Only the unyielding will in his heart supported him. He forcefully walked out from the erosion and arrived at the border of the yin wind meridians. Bang! His body was covered with injuries. After escaping from the wind erosion, Xiao Yan could not hold on any longer. His vision was quickly covered by darkness. He carried Zhou Xingyue, who was also unconscious, and suddenly fell from the sky. The terrifying wind erosion stopped after getting close to the edge of the yin wind meridian and did not come out again. Buzz! The moment before Xiao Yan fell to the ground, the space in front of him suddenly split open. The Xiao Ao holding the dragon soul bone rushed out and firmly pulled Xiao Yan. Seeing Zhou Xingyue who had fainted in the latter's arms, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. My God, she really came out from there. But how did this little girl survive? The Xiao Ao's eyes were filled with shock. He looked deeply at Zhou Xingyue and then laughed. He looked at himself and said, "Your dissolute debt is too much. Let me share some of it with you to prevent Xu and Kai's sister Lin from being jealous." As he spoke, the Xiao Ao snatched Zhou Xingyue from Xiao Yan's arms and pulled him away from the spatial crack. 2 inches star moon, Zhou Buyi suddenly woke up from his coma. When he saw the scene in front of him, he could not help but be shocked. He was lying on a wooden bed. The facilities in the room were very simple. Outside the room, a light breeze carried the fragrance of the green trees into the room. Sunlight shone through the window, making him feel dizzy. What was this place? You're finally awake. Don't worry, your sister is fine. Just as he was wondering, a lazy voice sounded. Joe Booye was shocked and looked towards the source of the voice. A purple-haired young man walked in and saw the former sitting up. His eyes lit up and he shouted at the same time. Who are you? What is this place? Where is my sister? Joe Booye frowned slightly. When he heard that Zhou Xingyue was fine, the worry in his heart was immediately lifted. He looked indifferently at the purple-haired youth and said softly. As he spoke, he had already secretly observed his body. He did not feel any discomfort. The origin qi in his body was also slowly recovering. My name is Xiao Ao. This place is the Yunluo Academy. Yunluo Academy? Did Xiao Yan bring me here? Joe Booye was startled, then he said in a deep voice. What do you think? You were almost killed by the wind erosion in the Yin Wind Meridian, although you look very annoying. I can't leave you alone, so I brought you back along the way. The Xiao Ao rolled its eyes. It took out a fruit from somewhere and took a fierce bite, saying vaguely. Where's my sister? Joe Booye frowned. He did not take the Xiao Ao's words to heart. Instead, his mood became much calmer. She was unconscious when Xiao Yan rescued her. She is still unconscious, but her qi is stable and her body is normal. She will be fine. The Xiao Ao shrugged without a care in the world. Her body, everything is normal. Was it Xiao Yan who examined her? Joe Booye's expression suddenly sank. He clenched his teeth tightly, and the veins on his neck bulged. His fists had long been tightly clenched. Its older sister Xuan and Kai's sister Lin. The Xiao Ao glared at Joe Booye and snorted. It's Xiao Yan's wife. Joe Booye smiled awkwardly when he heard that. He thought of the two beautiful girls he had seen in illusory spirit space, and his mood eased up a lot. Where is my sister? I want to see her. After a moment of silence, Joe Booye spoke in a low voice. Let's go. I came to ask you to come over. He gave a cold snort and threw the Xiao Ao away. After that, he turned around and left. Joe Booye pursed his lips. A heavy look flashed across his eyes and he followed closely. Following the Xiao Ao, Joe Booye quickly saw Zhou Xingyue lying quietly on the bed. The latter's expression was calm. Her breathing was stable and her face was rosy. The last trace of worry in Joe Booye's heart finally disappeared when he saw Zhou Xingyue. He could not help but stretch out his hand to help the former pull her hair up. His eyes were filled with tender love. After walking out of the spacious room, Joe Booye slowly walked on this heavenly peak. Looking at it from afar, green pine trees and green cypresses covered the mountain forest. Powerful origin qis filled the air. 10 tall peaks stood tall and looked after each other. It was an excellent training ground. Joe Booye saw Xiao Yan in front of a giant tree on the peak. Xiao Yan leaned against the tree trunk with a relaxed expression. He was enjoying the afternoon sunlight to his heart's content. Sit down. It has been a long time since I have seen the sun. It is rare for me to be so free. If you still want to fight, wait until I have rested enough. Xiao Yan laughed and laid down lazily under the tree. He didn't seem to notice it at all. It was a mighty emperor cultivation. Joe Booye smiled and sat down next to Xiao Yan. The afternoon sun shone down on his body, making him feel warm. Thank you. After a long time, Joe Booye suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was low, but it was full of sincerity. What are you thanking me for? If it wasn't for Zhou Xingyue herself, even if I was 10 times stronger, I wouldn't be able to save her. Xiao Yan smiled and thought of the light that wrapped around Zhou Xingyue. A look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He had been thinking for a long time, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that the feeling of the light was very similar to the arts of synchronization star execution. Could it be that Zhou Xingyue had also obtained the inheritance of the arts of synchronization in Star Moon Island? She herself. Joe Booye pondered for a while and said, ever since the 4 academies competition ended, there has been a slight change in her. Her comprehension of the secret arts in the Great Circulatory Cycle Revolution has reached a shocking level, and her cultivation speed has also improved by leaps and bounds. I'm afraid that she will reach the Emperor cultivation in less than a year. Xiao Yan nodded silently, then he narrowed his eyes and looked at the clear sky. There was not a single cloud in the sky, but it was hard to tell what kind of world was in this endless sky and what kind of world it was. Seeing that Xiao Yan didn't say anything, Zhou Buyi was smart enough not to ask any more questions. He already knew a lot of things. It was likely that Xiao Yan had already grasped the secret of entering and leaving illusory spirit space. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him and Zhou Xingyue to be brought out. However, this matter had nothing to do with him. You have been cultivating alone in illusory spirit space these past few days. Zhou Buyi pondered for a moment and spoke after some consideration. Not by yourself. There is still that little guy accompanying him. Xiao Yan smiled and looked at the small lake in the distance. The Xiao Ao was sitting comfortably by the lake, taking advantage of the cold to sleep. Zhou Buyi was silent. He didn't ask about the Xiao Ao's background. He was becoming more and more unable to see through Xiao Yan. He really didn't know how many secrets this guy was hiding. When Star Moon wakes up, I will have to trouble you to send my brother and sister to illusory spirit space. I estimate that the elders of Southern Sky Academy will open the illusory spirit space in another 5 days. Zhou Buyi took a deep breath and said in a low voice. He didn't dare to leave the realm and valley of the Yunluo Academy openly. If Su Ziyang or any other elders saw him, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves. Perhaps Xiao Yan would be involved as well. All right. Xiao Yan nodded slightly. He knew Zhou Buyi's concerns. Although the students of Realm and Valley didn't know Zhou Buyi, anyone would suspect that there were 2 more people in the Realm and Valley for no reason. Right, tomorrow is the day of the Inner Circle Disciple Competition in Yunluo Academy. Xuan and Kai Lin will participate. How about it? Do you want to see the core strength of Yunluo Academy? Xiao Yan suddenly said with a smile, and his eyes lit up. Will Elder Su find out? Zhou Buyi's heart was obviously moved. He thought for a while and frowned. There are still many things he needs to do. Besides, he won't be recognized under the eyes of a group of elders. I think you have the ability. Xiao Yan smiled indifferently and shrugged his shoulders. All right, in that case, let's take a look. Zhou Buyi also smiled and agreed without hesitation. Unknowingly, there was no longer any estrangement between him and Xiao Yan. Mu Yuyang's younger sister should also participate this time. I wonder if Xuan and Kai Lin will be a match for her. Xiao Yan pursed his lips and recalled what Yuan Tianmu had said earlier. It was very likely that Tang Weilin had imparted something to Mu Yiyue. This time, the match looked much better. The next day, the sun was shining brightly and it was winter. It was rare to have such a good weather. The warmth returned and brought a refreshing and comfortable feeling. Under this kind of weather, the inner courtyard competition that was held attracted the attention of all the students. Almost everyone woke up from their cultivation and walked towards the competition grounds in 2s and 3s. The winter sun shone down on everyone's body, making them feel warm. When Xiao Yan arrived at the competition grounds, the crowd had already become dark and dense. The mountain shaking and tsunami-like cheers that lingered in the air were like an unending tsunami. Ever since Black Nether Emperor had destroyed the Outer Academy students were also able to train in the Inner Academy. Hence, this level of competition had even attracted the attention of all the Outer Academy students. They hoped that they would be able to gain some insight from these seniors who possessed extraordinary strength. The Yunluo Academy is located in the capital of Chaos. It is really not easy for it to have such a scale. Besides Xiao Yan, Zhou Buyi's eyes swept across the thousands of students below and sighed. His aura was extremely ordinary, and the sharp aura around his body had been withdrawn. Even an emperor cultivation expert would not be able to detect anything if they did not observe carefully. They would only treat him as an ordinary student. Xiao Yan lightly smiled and didn't say anything, but his sharp eyes were looking at the huge stone monument in front of him. The huge stone monument was shining with a golden light, and each and every one of its names were shining brightly. The 2 words at the top were precisely Xiao Yan. This is the first time in so many years that the Yunluo Academy has obtained the #1 position in the 4 academies competition. You deserve this honor. Zhou Buyi also saw the name on the top of the stone monument. A trace of seriousness flashed across his eyes, and he recalled the battle between Xiao Yan and Kang Feng. In the future, there might be even more monstrous geniuses appearing in the Yunluo Academy. This can only be considered a certainty. As for the honor, I don't think it's a big deal. Xiao Yan smiled. His expression was calm. When he was in the Fighting Qi continent, he had looked down on this so-called honor. He was not like the other hot-blooded disciples of the realm and valley who were proud of this honor. Zhou Buyi was silent. There was also a huge stone tablet that stood in the middle of the academy in the Southern Sky Academy. It was engraved with the names of numerous outstanding young men in the history of the academy, Zhou Buyi. Naturally, it was also on the stone tablet. As the first person to leave his name on the stone tablet in the past 10 years, he was often proud of this. Now that he had heard Xiao Yan's words, for a moment, he felt a little depressed in his heart, and the pride he had in the past had dissipated a lot. Xiao Yan naturally could not guess what Zhou Buyi was thinking. His eyes swept across the crowd and quickly found Xuan and Kai Lin. Mu Yiyue was naturally beside him. Smiling, Xiao Yan looked at the few people who were participating in the competition. These young men and women were all high-spirited and high-spirited. They were all geniuses who had been placed on the soaring dragon ranking for the past few years. All of them had extraordinary strength, and they were eager to show off their abilities here. Zhu Kun and Ji Yuan didn't participate in this competition. Both of them had a much more stable mentality compared to these young geniuses. The main purpose of this competition was to let Mu Yiyue enter the realm and valley, and also to re-rank the soaring dragon ranking. The current strength of these two had probably surpassed most of the people. Wasting time on fighting here was useless. They did not care about the reputation of the soaring dragon ranking. After about a year, many of the elites in realm and valley would graduate. At that time, there would be at least 3 more spots. That was the time for them to participate in the competition. Xuan and Kai Lin. With the opportunity to cultivate in illusory spirit space, they naturally did not have much expectation for realm and valley. This time, they were only thinking of fighting with Mu Yiyue to test their strength. Su. Very quickly, a group of elders rushed over. The one leading them was Elder Wu. Ever since Wu Shaoqi went to the Mingan divine domain, although he was reluctant, there was nothing he could do. His entire person did not look as energetic as before. He lowered his eyelids and glanced at everyone before waving his hand and no longer saying anything. The elders at the side nodded. After maintaining the rules of the venue, they announced the start of the competition. Following the competition of a few contestants, it instantly ignited the enthusiasm of the audience. The sound of cheers that were like tidal waves was continuously heard. The sky-shaking cheers expelled the chill of winter. Xiao Yan and Zhou Buyi stood at the top of the stage. With their strength, they naturally could clearly see this level of competition. Basically, the result could be seen in a few moves from the 2 people on the stage. After watching a few matches, they found it rather boring. It seems like the competition will be boring before Mu Yiyue goes on stage. Xiao Yan shook his head helplessly and rubbed his temples. Zhou Buyi's expression was calm. After listening to Xiao Yan's words, he shifted his gaze away from the 2 people in the competition. He pursed his lips and smiled. If it wasn't for Xiao Yan's face, he would have already waved his sleeve and left the competition. Mu Yuyang has gone to the Green Lotus Sword sect. Does Brother Zhou know anything about this sect? After changing the topic, Xiao Yan said in a low voice. Not really. Zhou Buyi narrowed his eyes and said slowly. When Mu Yuyang joined the Green Lotus Sword sect, he had been searching for all the information about the Green Lotus Sword sect in the family. Even in the Zhou clan, there were very few records about this sect. The former seemed to be just a small sect. Green Lotus Sword sect. This generation's sect master is Tang Weilin, the adopted daughter of the previous sect master. Now that she has the strength of a monarch cultivation, the size of the sect is equivalent to a quasi-first-rate sect in the star field. A sect of this scale. It's only equivalent to a sect under the command of one of the 4 major families. Zhou Buyi spoke slowly, but his eyes were filled with confusion. Given Mu Yuyang's ability, he could easily go to a major sect in the star field, but why did he go to an unknown small sect? Xiao Yan frowned. He recalled the Purple Radiance sect of Spirit Heaven Mansion, which was one of the subordinate sects of Xiao clan. The sect master, Xiao Wang, had also reached the monarch cultivation. This scale was no different from the org. The Green Lotus Sword sect could be considered a big sect in the ancient era. It was created by the Green Lotus Immortal, Li Taixuan. However, Li Taixuan fell in love with the mountains and rivers. This sect seemed to have been created out of his interest. Since the inheritance was passed down to this day, most of the time, it has been like a patient struggling to survive. Zhou Buyi's voice was heavy. Suddenly, his tone changed. Rumor has it that the Green Lotus Sword sect has a few techniques of the Green Lotus Sword technique left by Li Taixuan. However, the charm of the technique has been lost in the great chaos of the Gu Wu. Now, only its shape and charm have been passed down. Its power is not as great as before. After hearing Zhou Bai's words, Xiaoyan gently shook his head. He did not know what to say. While the two of them were talking, the competition below was also going on like a raging fire. Mu Yiyue, Xuan and Kai Lin also went on stage. In just a few moves, the arrogant opponent was defeated miserably, shocking a large number of people. Elder Wu, who had been maintaining a calm expression, involuntarily let out a soft exclamation of surprise when he saw Xuan and Kai Lin's performance. His eyes moved and looked towards the viewing platform in the distance. At a glance, he had discovered Xiaoyan's traces. The latter had also clearly sensed his gaze and gently nodded his head. This brat. Could it be that his strength has increased again? Elder Wu was unable to see through Xiaoyan's strength even after watching for a long time. He involuntarily muttered in his heart. Currently, his strength had also reached the half-step Emperor cultivation. He was only a step away from the true Emperor cultivation, and could break through at any time. However, he still couldn't see through Xiaoyan. Elder Wu raised his brows and looked to Xiaoyan's side, but he couldn't see anything. But there was clearly a person there earlier. I'm really old now. I can't believe my eyes are so blurry. Elder Wu blinked his eyes and saw the same scene as before. He sighed helplessly and retracted his gaze. He then turned his gaze back to the competition below. To be able to scare Elder Wu, Brother Zhou's movement technique is truly amazing. Xiaoyan glanced at Elder Wu below and smiled softly. In the next moment, a figure appeared beside him. It was Zhou Buyi. The secret arts of my Zhou clan is not just an exaggeration. Zhou Buyi couldn't help but smile when he heard this. There was a trace of pride in his tone. Around noon, the result of everyone's battle was finally decided. For a moment, the few families were happy and the few families were worried. The first place was naturally Mu Yiyue. From the beginning to the end, her attacks were not fancy at all, but she was able to defeat her opponent with just a few moves. Looking at her strength, she had also advanced to the Monarch Emperor. She had already made a qualitative leap. The few students from Realm and Valley had witnessed the growth of Mu Yiyu's strength. Immediately, they became silent. Some of them had not advanced to the Monarch Emperor yet. Whether it was Mu Yiyue, Xiao Xuan or Kai Lin, they had advanced to the Monarch Emperor one after another. The blow to them was not small. The battle between the top 5 didn't start at the top of Heaven Pillar Peak. This made all the outer court students extremely excited. Although they didn't understand the way the Monarch Emperor level expert fought, the intensity of it still made their blood boil. When Mu Yiyue attacked, Zhou Bai's eyes stared intently at the former. It was a long while later before he withdrew his gaze. There was a trace of joy between his brows. Clearly, he felt that Zhou Xingyue was a little stronger. The exchange between Kai Lin and Mu Yiyue also attracted the attention of all the students. It was not only because of the exchange between the two peerless ladies. Every time the two of them made a move, it would shake the surroundings and attract waves of exclamations. Kai Lin's beautiful eyes contained a cold light. Her robust figure lightly flashed in the void like a black shadow, dazzling everyone. As her slender 10 fingers lightly moved, numerous terrifying origin chi pillars continuously blasted out. It was like a rose with thorns, and the sharp aura was astonishing. In front of her, Mu Yiyu's figure was graceful and her white dress set off. Her slender figure was like a slender and graceful green lotus. Every step she took was extremely subtle. Her palm moved lightly and neutralized every move of Kai Lin. It was steady and carried a trace of gentle killing intent. Xiaoyan narrowed his eyes and looked at Mu Yiyu's figure. In a trance, he seemed to see a green lotus dancing in the wind. It was very lively. He pursed his lips. Xiaoyan lowered his eyes slightly. This movement technique, Monarch skill, might have been taught to Mu Yiyue by Tang Weilin, but he didn't know. Other than that, there were other more powerful moves. The battle between the two girls did not enter a deadlock. After a moment of fighting, the two of them smartly stopped one after another. Kai Lin's long and narrow eyes looked at Mu Yiyue and a moment later she automatically admitted defeat. Clearly she had seen Mu Yiyu's true strength and did not want to waste her strength because of this. Mu Yiyue smiled and lightly nodded to Kai Lin. She also knew that the other party also did not display their true strength, but if they fought to the end, the one who would win would still be her. Although Kai Lin taking the initiative to admit defeat disappointed the people who originally wanted to feast their eyes, but the following battle once again aroused everyone's interest. The battle between Xu Er and Kai Lin finally began in the last match. Xiao Yan also showed a strong interest in the battle between the two girls. He nodded at Zhou Buyi and leapt down. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at the area with the most open field of vision. Zhou Buyi hesitated for a moment and followed after them. His chi slowed down as he tried his best not to attract anyone's attention. Hey, these two senior sisters are really pretty. This face, this figure. Tisk tisk tisk, they are so much better than those young ladies of our family. If we can get a kiss on them, it would not be a waste to come to this academy. In the audience seats in front, a few handsome young men looked at Kai Lin and Xu Er who were on the stage. Their eyes were filled with astonishment, and then they began to discuss with each other. Their faces were filled with lascivious expressions. Hey, with young Master Zong's strength behind him, if he were to throw out a large number of monarch crystals or spirit weapons, would he still be afraid that they would not take the bait? A young man wearing the inner court uniform revealed a trace of a lascivious expression on his face. He looked at the handsome young man beside him with a smile on his face, and his thoughts instantly moved with the desire to spoil him. That's right, this is a genius of the inner courtyard of the Yunluo Academy. He has strength, bearing, and face. He's much stronger than those girls in the brothels. Why don't you think about it, young Master Zhang? Another young man with a fat face was also smiling. He was whispering beside the former's ear. A trace of satisfaction flashed across the eyes of the young man surnamed Zhang. Immediately, he laughed and said, "Don't worry. Once this competition is over, I will pay a visit to the two senior sisters. If they encounter any trouble during their cultivation, regardless of whether it is the monarch skill or the cultivation technique, my Zhang family will be able to provide them with help." Alas, it is a pity that young Master Zhang has only been in the inner courtyard for a short period of time. I heard that the granddaughter of Elder Wu is called Wu Shaoqi. She is valiant and heroic, and she is a famous beauty. If I can hold her in my arms, I wonder how it would feel. The inner court youth who spoke earlier took a deep breath as he spoke, as if he had smelled Wu Shaoqi's scent. Hee, although Wu Shaoqi has left, Mu Yiyue is still here. If young Master Zhang can subdue this fierce horse, with her protecting the inner court, where can't we go? The fat-faced youth laughed sinisterly and continued to bewitch young Master Zong's heart. Don't worry, none of them will be able to escape. Hearing the two people's words, young Master Zhang swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared fixedly at the two beautiful figures on the stage. Hey! Suddenly, a fair hand was gently placed on young Master Zong's shoulder. Before the latter could react, the next moment, even the stone chair that he was sitting on was blasted flying. It drew a beautiful arc in the air and violently smashed into an empty corner of the audience seats. In the next moment, a miserable cry of pain suddenly sounded from young Master Zhang. Boom! Boom! Another two explosions sounded. The two people seated beside young Master Zhang accurately landed beside the latter. However, their heads were bleeding and they completely fainted. Xiao Yan, what are you doing? Elder Wu's sharp eyes swept over when he was jolted awake by this sudden accident. He saw Xiao Yan standing in a spectator stand with a cold expression. Many of the surrounding students were stunned by the latter's sudden attack. They were so frightened that they trembled and did not dare to speak. Mr. Xiao Yan, what's wrong? Xu Er and Kai Lin, who were fighting on the platform, involuntarily stopped. Xu Er looked at Xiao Yan in surprise and asked in a strange manner. Elder Wu, what privileges does a student who passes the holy rank trial have in the student? Xiao Yan first smiled at Xu Er, then looked at the judges' seats and his voice resounded throughout the entire audience. Possessing the privileges of a rank 2 elder. Elder Wu took a deep breath and stood up. He looked straight at Xiao Yan and spoke in a deep voice. All the surrounding elders looked at Xiao Yan, but none of them dared to speak. The latter had wreaked havoc in the punishment department, so he had no fear of the so-called elders. He was not someone they could afford to offend. All right. If it was Elder Su or Elder Xiao, what would happen if their family was insulted by a little inner academy student? Xiao Yan looked around. All the people present had sharp eyebrows that slanted upwards. The aura of an emperor cultivation suddenly erupted from all over their bodies. A sharp aura spread out, causing the expressions of all the students to change. It was difficult for them to even breathe. When they sensed Xiao Yan's aura, all the elders, including Elder Wu, were shocked. They stared at Xiao Yan with their mouths wide open. After a long while, Elder Wu's somewhat hoarse voice slowly sounded. "I understand. We will handle this matter and give you a satisfactory explanation." The moment Elder Wu spoke, it instantly caused a storm in the hearts of all the students. The former was the first elder of the punishment department and was an extremely dignified person in the hearts of all the students. Today, he had actually submitted in front of a student. "There's no need for that. I will handle it myself." A second stage elder. "If I can't even manage an inner court student who spoke rudely, this will also damage the dignity of Elder Su and Elder Xiao." Xiao Yan laughed and then narrowed his eyes. His voice was like a thin line as it resounded in Elder Wu's ears. "Elder Wu, these few fellows insulted Xuan and Kai Lin, and they also spoke rudely to Senior Wu and Mu Yiyue. If I don't kill them, I would have already given the academy face." Hearing this, Elder Wu's expression suddenly changed and he gritted his teeth. Under the dumbfounded gazes of all the students, he coldly waved his sleeve and said, "It's fine as long as you don't kill them." Quote, 0 inches Elder Wu, you can't do that. One of the gray-robed elders was slightly startled when he heard this. He then spoke in a deep voice. "Even if Xiao Yan has the privilege of being a rank 2 elder, his identity is only a student after all. How can he violate the rules of the academy?" The other elders also spoke up one after another, trying their best to protect the authority of the elders. Elder Wu expressionlessly sat down and coldly snorted. "Even if you want to punish him, only Qi Bai and Elder Xiao have the authority to do so. Even Elder Su and Elder Xiao cannot do so. If you can find Qi Bai and Elder Xiao, it will be fine." All the elders were at a loss for words. They once again recalled the time when Xiao Yan killed Wei Tong in front of everyone in punishment department. Even Su Ziyang, who was known for his iron fist, tacitly agreed to it. It seemed like it wasn't their turn to speak now. Under the gazes of all the students, Xiao Yan flashed and arrived at the place where young Master Zhang had fallen. He extended his hand and directly lifted the ladder from the ruins. "Ah, someone has come. He has killed someone." Young Master Zhang's originally handsome face was currently covered in blood. He was originally wearing a spirit weapon class soft armor within his brocade robe. However, it had been smashed apart by Xiao Yan's punch just now. All the bones in his body seemed to be about to break as he cried out in a miserable manner. "Shut up." Xiao Yan's eyes were cold as he spoke faintly, causing young Master Zhang to feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. It was as if he was placed in an endless pool of blood. Killing intent filled the air, devouring his mind. His miserable and helpless roar was pale and powerless. "The Zhang family is a big family in the Starfield. I must tell my father that I must kill you." Zhang Rui was lifted up by Xiao Yan's neck like a chick. He stared at Xiao Yan with his blood-red eyes, his voice full of hatred and a hint of weeping. "Ridiculous words." Xiao Yan sneered. In the next moment, he threw Zhang Rui out again without hesitation. Under everyone's shocked eyes, he landed heavily on the side of the competition stage and smashed several stone stools into powder. The surrounding students cried out in alarm and hurriedly stood up to withdraw. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Xiao Yan. Zhang Rui was a student who entered the academy 2 years ago. When Black Nether Emperor entered the academy, he just happened to return home to save his relatives. When he returned, the inner court and outer court had already merged. With the former's talent and the resources behind it, naturally, he would soon become one of the best in their batch. After entering the inner academy, he would have a large group of followers. For a time, there was no difference between the limelight and the current Xiao Yan, who had thrown him to the ground twice without showing any mercy. He was like killing a chicken to warn a monkey, and he instantly intimidated everyone. Xuan and Kai Lin stood on the competition stage and looked at each other in dismay. They did not know if they should go down and stop Xiao Yan. "Aren't you a pervert? Why are you lying on the ground now?" Xiao Yan walked over with big steps with an expressionless face. He kicked Zhang Rui out of the pile of gravel and sneered. "Bastard, just you wait." Zhang Rui's face was covered in blood as he struggled to lie on the ground. As he cried out in pain, Xiao Yan's attack was exceptionally clever. Every time he attacked, he would torture the former's bones and bones, but he would not lose consciousness. Who still has the attention of my 2 wives? Come on, I'll let you have one hand. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes and looked at the 1,000 students in front of him. His voice was cold. The few students who had just made it into the top 10 in the competition heard this and their expressions changed. They hurriedly lowered their heads, afraid that Xiao Yan would look at them. Most of them had experienced Black Nether Emperor's invasion of the Yunluo, so they had naturally heard about the terrifying strength Xiao Yan had displayed. Xiao Yan once again cast his gaze at Zhang Rui, who was lying on the ground. His expression was ice-cold. He had advanced to the Emperor cultivation and was about to head to the Mingan Divine Domain. Xuan Kai Lin, and Zhu Kun Ji Yuan still needed to stay here for a few more years. He needed to establish his prestige now, so that all those who had ill intentions towards them could give up on this idea. By the way, besides you, there are also a few other people who are as annoying as you. A cold laugh resounded in the ears of everyone present. Xiao Yan once again grabbed Zhang Rui and glanced at a certain place in an obscure manner. After which, he carried Zhang Rui and soared into the sky, and rushed towards a certain direction of the academy. He has left. He has finally left. What a terrifying aura. It is even more terrifying than some of the elders in the clan. He's Xiao Yan, the one who led the Yunluo Academy to become the #1 disciple of the 4 academies competition? After a while, the people who had recovered finally started discussing amongst themselves. Their voices instantly covered the shouts of the elders who were maintaining order. Elder Wu sat on the spot without moving. His eyes looked in the direction where Xiao Yan had left. He frowned. A long while later, he finally came to a realization. That was the direction of the punishment department. In the audience, Bai Yangchao was covered in cold sweat. Then he smiled bitterly. When Xiao Yan left, he looked at him and it almost made him shiver. It seemed that he still remembered what he had thought about Xuan. As he thought about it, Bai Yangchao silently looked into the distance. After noticing the direction Xiao Yan had left in, he sighed in his heart. He hoped that Xiao Yan would be more tactful. Otherwise, he might really be beaten up. Ever since the failure rate of competing for the quota for the realm in Valley a few years ago, Lu Xiangyang's reputation had fallen to a low level because he had used many students. Under the care of a few elders, although the position of captain of the punishment department had been removed, he had been given the title of an elder's assistant, although he could not enter the realm in Valley. However, if he could grow stronger in the future, he would very likely become an elder of the punishment department in the future. He would enter the management of the Yunluo Academy. In these few years, Lu Xiangyang had been living a very comfortable life. As the students who had a disagreement with him graduated one after another, he became the elder Lu whom many students respected. This made him quite happy, and as his previous superior, Elder Wu. Naturally, it was impossible for him to make things difficult for him, so he lived a comfortable life. He was waiting for the time when he would break through to the monarch emperor and become a true elder. But now, a man who always woke him up from his dream was standing in front of him, staring at him coldly. Xiao Yan, what are you doing? We haven't met in so many years. I have never offended you. Lu Xiangyang's heart trembled, and he said in a threatening manner. However, in his mind, he recalled the time when Xiao Yan forcefully entered the punishment department, and in front of the many elders, he forcefully knocked down a highly respected elder to the ground. Don't be so anxious. I just have something I want to tell you. Xiao Yan casually threw Zhang Rui to the side. The latter fell to the ground and groaned in pain. Lu Xiangyang's eyelids twitched when he saw this. He didn't know what Xiao Yan was trying to do. I am about to leave the academy. Xuan'er and Kai Lin, if there is no accident, will also enter Realm in Valley next year. Eliminate your evil thoughts as soon as possible. It is best if nothing has happened. You should still be your elder Lu. If you dare to touch a hair of theirs, believe it or not, I will let you die without a burial ground. At the end of his words, Xiao Yan's entire body was filled with killing intent. It was like thousands of sharp blades piercing through the sky. Lu Xiangyang's face turned pale. He felt that these sharp blades were about to cut through his throat. The fear of death instantly emerged in his mind. I understand. I understand. Besides, I am no match for them now. Lu Xiangyang's forehead was covered in sweat, his body was trembling, and he said with a crying face. It's good that you know. Not to mention that you haven't even reached the monarch emperor yet. Even if you have reached this realm, I won't be able to stop Elder Xiao and Elder Su from killing you." Xiao Yan smiled coldly. His cold gaze swept across the surroundings of Punishment Department, and he said in a cold voice, "Where's Yi Yi? Why can't I sense his aura in the inner courtyard?" This fellow had some improper thoughts about Kai Lin back then. He had to teach her a lesson. He has already graduated," Lu Xianyang said in a low voice with a sullen face. "So soon?" Xiao Yan frowned and gave Lu Xianyang a deep look once again, as if he had seen through Lu Xianyang's mind. Lu Xianyang lowered his head, as if he was facing a plague, and did not dare to look at him directly.